I heard you finally divorced my son, my mother-in-law said suddenly over the phone. You're just not good enough for my son. That's why I kept telling you to divorce Mason sooner, she added. I almost laughed at her tone but managed to hold it in. Well, I finally realized I couldn't get along with my mother-in-law since Mason and I divorced 3 years ago, I replied. My name is Fai. I've been living with Chaco, the cat I rescued 2 years ago. Until 3 years ago, I was married. I met my ex-husband, Mason, through a friend, and we got married. At first, I didn't know his true nature, but after we got married, I slowly began to see his real personality. Mason graduated from college, but he had never been scolded much before. He made mistakes at work, got in trouble with his bosses and clients, didn't like apologizing, and quit his job soon after we got married. For a while, Mason hid this from me, and I only found out when I saw his tax slip in the room. When I confronted him, he said, "We're married, so it's okay." Mason then got a job at a different company, but it didn't suit him, so he changed jobs again. I suggested he work in assembly line production if he didn't like dealing with people, but he had too much pride to do a job even a high school graduate could do. He couldn't stay unemployed, so I urged Mason, who didn't seem eager to work, and now he's working at a dispatch company. Mason is handsome, so there were always other women around. He cheated on me several times while we were dating. Each time I threatened to break up with him, but Mason would say, "The others are just for fun. You're the only one for me, Fai," and foolishly, I would forgive him. This cycle of being cheated on and forgiving him kept repeating. When I finally decided to break up with Mason for real, he surprised me by proposing with a ring. My parents were strongly against it, warning me that I would struggle, but I had a strange confidence that I could change Mason. So I went against my parents' advice and married him. I naively believed that everything would work out if I just stayed strong, but I soon realized I was wrong. Mason turned out to be a mama's boy. My mother-in-law resented me for taking her son away. Even though we didn't live together because her house and workplace were far away, she called me every day. She would ask, "What's Mason doing? Are you making sure Mason eats properly? You're not making Mason lonely, are you?" These were trivial calls. Instead of calling me, she should have called Mason directly. But I didn't want to be disliked by her just after getting married, so I couldn't argue back and ended up apologizing. I asked Mason to reduce the frequency of his mother's unannounced visits and calls, but he said, "Why? It's fine, isn't it? Don't you hate it when my mom calls you or comes over every day?" He didn't seem to mind at all. So I suggested to my own mother that she start calling Mason every day, just like his mother did to me. I had her ask, "Mason, what's Faye doing now? Are you making sure Faye eats properly? Are you properly grateful to Faye?" I wanted Mason to experience what I was going through. Surprisingly, Mason quickly reacted, "Hey, can you tell your mother to stop calling me every day? It can't be helped, right? My mother has free time too. I can't answer her calls because I have to talk to your mother, so you have to talk to her." No, that's not what I meant. My mom was so happy. Normally, she would get scolded if she called every day just to talk about nothing important, but Mason was so kind and told her she could call as often as she wanted. "I never said that," I protested. "That's strange, isn't it? Because when I asked you to tell your mom to stop calling me every day, you said you didn't care about my mom calling you every day, right?" "Just because I said that doesn't mean she has to call me every day. It's driving me crazy." "Then tell your mother the same thing." "My mother is different. It's exhausting because it's your mother." "It's the same for me, so you should answer your mom's calls." "I will not answer any calls from your mom from now on." After discussing with Mason, I sent a message to my mother-in-law asking her to contact Mason for everything in the future, and I blocked her calls and messages. However, when my mother-in-law realized she couldn't reach me, she started visiting more often. She used to only come on weekends, but now she started coming even on weekdays when I was at work. She used the spare key that Mason gave her without my permission to enter the house and rummage through things as if they were her own. I was really shocked when I came home from work on a weekday and found my mother-in-law comfortably sitting in the house. Her behavior escalated. For instance, she once said, "Where's that Louis Vuitton bag?" "Oh, that it was lovely, so I took it." "Why would you take it without asking? Isn't the wife's stuff the same as mine?" "Don't be so uptight, Faith." She takes my things without asking or says, "Oh, Faith, I borrowed a bit of money." One day around noon, the doorbell rang. I found it was the pizza delivery guy. My mother-in-law, who often drops by unexpectedly, had ordered the pizza without asking me and told me to pay for it. I had no choice but to pay and ended up with 2 pizzas. "There's nothing for you, Faith. If you want some, order your own." She made me foot the bill, and my mother-in-law and Mason enjoyed the pizza right in front of me. I was furious, so in front of them, I took the money my mother-in-law had taken from Mason's wallet and the pizza money, and I left. That night, I ate barbecue alone. Instead of going home, I stayed at a manga cafe and came back early the next day. When I returned, I was shocked to find food scattered all over from their meal. After that day, I barely spoke to Mason. He saw this as an opportunity to start cheating. At first, he'd secretly meet or message another woman. But when he realized I wasn't interested, he openly talked to her on the phone in front of me or made plans to go out with her. I started questioning if this guy even graduated college with his outrageous behavior. Then, to make matters worse, my mother-in-law got into my car without asking and caused an accident. Luckily, it was just my car involved, and no one else was hurt, but my car was totaled. My mother-in-law ended up in the hospital with a broken hip. It's Faith's fault for not driving Mom around. You're to blame. How are you going to fix this? Mason and my mother-in-law began blaming me for the accident, and I lost my patience. Fine, I'll take responsibility and report my car stolen. Every time she comes over, she takes my stuff and money. What are you saying? The police won't intervene in family matters. Didn't you know? Even if she's a relative, stealing is a serious crime, grand larceny. We don't even live together, and she's not my biological mother. In that case, I'll file a complaint. As I stood up, Mason tried to stop me and Phil scolded me. Who's the real villain here? Your wife steals, your son cheats, and you, Phil, never apologize for your family's wrongs and always blame others. I think you're the real villain. With that, I laid out printed photos of Mason's affair and messages on the desk. Mason, let's get a divorce, and you'll pay the alimony in one go. What are you talking about? I've already spoken to a lawyer. A lawyer? Isn't that too much? If it is, just sign the divorce papers, stamp them, and pay the alimony now. Then we won't need a lawyer. You know I can't afford that kind of money, and honestly, after openly cheating like this, I don't see why I shouldn't divorce you. But Faith, you love me, right? Not at all. I've had enough of you not standing up for me against your mother, behaving badly, and cheating. If you can't pay, then I'll let the lawyer handle it. Fine, since the bank isn't open now, I'll pay it properly later. I'll sign the divorce papers right away. Dad, why? Why are you saying this? Phil, visibly angry, yelled at Mason. Don't you get it? If you get sued, it'll ruin my career. And if the neighbors find out, it'll be embarrassing. I won't stand for it. Listen, I'll lend you the money this time, but you have to pay me back every month. If you can't, I'll make you sell your organs or work on a crab fishing boat, whatever it takes to repay me. Got it? Okay. Phil was very concerned about appearances. He pressured Mason to sign the divorce papers and even made him write a repayment memorandum for the loan he gave him. Despite leaving household matters to Mill, Phil excelled at work and held a high position, preferring amicable resolutions to avoid disadvantages. However, his focus on money led him to ensure Mason signed a repayment agreement for the loan. Since the apartment was in my name, I removed Mason's belongings, mostly clothes, manga books, and hobbies. I reclaimed the keys from Mason, including the spare he gave Mill for the mailbox. Phil assured me he'd retrieve it if they didn't return it. Later, Phil compensated me for damages, and the key was returned to the mailbox. Mason complained about not wanting a divorce and who would care for his injured mother, but I ignored him, blocking his calls and messages, cutting off contact. I moved out soon after and started anew. 3 years passed, and when I'd almost forgotten them, I got a call from an unknown number. It was my mother-in-law. Faith, long time no see. I'm glad your number hasn't changed. Why is she calling after all this time? I wondered, but she started talking before I could respond. You were such a terrible wife, weren't you? You never came to see me. When I was hurt and in the hospital, you never visited. After I left the hospital and you moved out on your own, I don't understand what you were thinking. Why should I? I don't have any obligation to take care of you, do I? Well, look at that. I couldn't reach you at all when I called, and you never replied to my messages, so I got a new phone. I really wonder what Mason saw in you, huh? As my mother-in-law kept complaining, I asked her why she got a new phone and called me. So you finally divorced my son. You two were never right for each other. I've been telling you to divorce him as soon as possible. Excuse me, what are you talking about? Finally, I realized my mother-in-law's rambling didn't make sense. Mason and I divorced 3 years ago. I almost chuckled at the deflated tone of my mother-in-law's voice, but I held it back. We divorced 3 years ago after your accident with my car and when Mason was cheating. There were many reasons for the divorce. Huh? No way. Huh? I received my alimony in a lump sum from Phil on Mason's behalf, and I haven't contacted him since the divorce. Well, I've blocked all calls, but Mason. Then who called me? According to my mother-in-law, someone claiming to be Mason recently called, asking for money to settle the divorce, saying he had none and gave the money to a friend claiming to be Mason. I have no idea who that could be. So the guy who took the money claiming to be Mason's friend, was he definitely a scammer? I'm not sure how much was taken, but it sounds like my mother-in-law was scammed out of a shocking amount. But it's not my problem. Well then, as I tried to end the call, my mother-in-law caught my attention. Hey, don't you think I'm pitiful? I do feel sorry for her, but ultimately, it's not my issue. I'll make sure to be cautious and warn my parents. I see this as a lesson learned. Could you lend me some money? Why don't you ask your son? Mason changed his contact info my husband doesn't know, and I have no idea where he is now. Please, I'm begging you. She was always shameless even when I was married, but I never expected this. I replied, I understand. Well, if you return all the money for the car and appliances that were damaged after you took them, plus the money you stole from my wallet, then I might consider it. I can't possibly repay all that. What are you saying? Asking for that from someone who's now a stranger to you shows a lack of common sense. I could demand it from you right now. Don't you have any compassion? Sorry, I have no compassion left for you. It's unbelievable. Breaking up with Mason and divorcing you was the right decision. I'm done, forget it. My mother-in-law keeps calling and hanging up on me. To avoid her pestering for money, I blocked her new contact details. It feels like a relief. I was surprised that Mason didn't tell Mill about our divorce 3 years ago, and also that she fell for the scam and took my money. Phil tends to talk a lot, so he probably told Mason not to tell his mother. Phil will be retiring soon, and he'll be furious if he finds out someone scammed a large sum of his retirement savings. Since Phil is retiring soon, you might make my mother-in-law work to pay back the money, no matter how much she begs. She hasn't worked since marrying Phil, so I wonder if she can even find a job. Karma always comes around. Isn't that right, Choco? Choco, lounging in the sunlight on the windowsill, responded with a meow and a yawn. After my divorce, I got involved in rescuing cats. I started raising Choco in my new apartment, joining a friend in volunteer adoption events. I instantly fell in love with Choco when I met him. I kept going back to the rescue organization, helping out however I could. They were always kind and patient, never minding my questions. They'd always asked about Choco's well-being, showing genuine care. I'm proud to have made good friends with such wonderful people. One of them, a man, and I are planning to have dinner together. He used to care for Choco, so he's fond of him. He mentioned how he'd love to keep Choco, but he already has 3 rescue cats at home, so he's unsure about taking on more. When I offered to take Choco, he was thrilled. He's a real cat lover, always talking about rescue cats, his own pets, and sharing stories about Choco. He understands how coming home to cats after a tiring day melts away the stress. Our conversation was lively, and for the first time in a while, I felt genuinely happy chatting with a man. I'm not rushing into marriage, but this time I want to take things slow and get to know him well, hoping to build a wonderful family together eventually.